Hello guys, and welcome back to another cold episode. With the new set being released, I wanted to give a look at what decks are going to be the best in the new season. So, let's quickly go through the explanation here. You've seen a tier list video, you know what's going on, right? So, first and foremost, I've split this into 5 tiers. We have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, rogue, and everything else. And I think this format in particular, just not like this meta, but the format of like best of 1, ladder climb, stuff like that, allows for a lot more decks to kind of shine and do well. And it really does, at least in my mind, create another tier of like tiered decks, right? So you have like the tier 1, the tier 2, and then the tier 3, and then there's the rogue, right? So tier 3 decks to me are decks that are able to kind of play the game and still really do well in like a best of 1 format, but may have like significant weaknesses like due to max C or something like that. And rogue seems to be where it's a bit more of a gimmick, and then everything else is like just bad, right? And you'll see when I do the tiers what I mean by that. So, yeah, there you go. I have a whole lot here. We're not going to talk about everything, but we will talk about some of the new stuff in particular. So there's that. First and foremost, just going to get these out of the way. Adamantipator doesn't do anything without the block dragon. Adventure's not real. Not real. Ancient Gear did technically receive some new support, and honestly, I'm going to put it into rogue at best. I really don't have faith in like any of the Ancient Gear stuff. It's fine, right? But like Ancient Gear kind of is at it's kind of having an identity crisis. It doesn't really know what it wants to do, right? It doesn't want to OTK, it doesn't want to sit on like a towers and like burn the opponent. It doesn't want to do random other shenanigans, like maybe, I don't know, like Link Summon or something like that. It's confused, and it's okay. Ancient Warriors, probably rogue. Okay. Aroma, aka Plant Link, received a pretty big boost to its support, mostly due to the fact that Ragnarika came out, which I will be talking more specifically about Ragnarika as well, but for the most part, this is just Plant Link, which is the best idea, or best engine for the Ragnarika cards, right? Best slot, best deck for the Ragnarika engine, right? So all in all, I'm going to put it in tier 3. I think this deck in particular has, again, has a glaring weakness to things like Maxi, but overall, due to the Ragnarika stuff, doing kind of a bit of, not heavy lifting, but like allowing it to play a few more additional starters and stuff like that, and extenders, makes Plant Link, you know, very similar to like Dragon Link. So there's that. It's pretty good, but nothing too insane. However, notably, 3 Dryas and 3 Healer. It's pretty good. It's pretty good, but it's not insane. Not a real deck. Not a real deck. I mean, it's basically not a real deck, but it has potential. Let's be honest, Blue Eyes is not good. Okay, Branded. Branded, I'm going to put solidly into tier 1. You can do pretty well with it. I do think it's a bit weaker than like some of the other top decks, as we saw at Worlds. Against like the top competitors, I think Branded is significantly weaker. However, against everyone else, it's pretty good. Yeah, Branded is just a good deck. Hate to say it, but it is. It's just a good deck. Also, Grass is wild. 60 card decks are they never brick. It's just I don't know what's going on with Master Duel. I don't think it's just Master Duel. I think it's just wild in general. So there's that. So technically this is BA, right? However, I want to more specifically talk about this in regards to Rank 3 Turbo, or more specifically Phantom Knights-esque. I think Phantom Knights do have some capacity of playing the game with like the adventure stuff with Cherubini, with the Phantom Knight, etc. They're okay, right? They're not making like an insane end board or anything like that, but they do have the ability to kind of win the game off of some insane cards, like the being able to send like Water Enchantress and stuff. So there's that. Not a real deck. We'll talk about Bestials later, because Bestials are obviously good just in general, but I feel like for the most part they're not really like a deck of their own. They're more so an engine, similar to like the adventure stuff. I don't think adventure is necessarily that bad, but there's that. Sorry, excuse me. Centurion. Centurion I'm going to put into tier 2. Centurion's pretty good. Just straight up, it's pretty good. For 2 reasons. 1, Bestials are really good. Just in general. Just holistically, Bestials are very solid. And being able to play the Bestials really does help Centurion. And 2, it doesn't die to Max C. That's kind of it. Centurions are able to kind of play around Max C pretty effectively, and stuff like that. They can also play a wide variety of hand traps, which definitely boosts their power level as well. And their end boards are fairly decent. They're not insane, but like they're okay. So there's that. Burn's not real. It can't hurt you. Chimera is. I'm gonna put it in Rogue. Chimera is fine. It can do stuff, but I've yet to really see it do all that much. It's okay. I'm terrible at beating it though. Rainbow Dragon or Rainbow. What are these called? Crystal Beasts. Crystal Beasts are whatever. Not real. Not real. Cybers is always, they're pretty good. Even the the code talker stuff is still pretty good. Yeah. Not real. Not a real deck. DDD's not real. Despia, we already talked about branded. Hero. Hero goes in Rogue. Hero is a staple Rogue deck. Dino's pretty Rogue. Yeah, we'll put it there. Dino Morbin, also not great. The problem with Dinomorphia is the simple fact that there are so many burn effects right now. Mostly due to the fact that... Mostly due to Ubel, right? It's like... Yeah, Ubel just absolutely demolishes this deck. Dogmatica is kind of bad. But it can do stuff from time to time. That's it. Dragon Link. Why is Boral in here as well? There's a Boral guy in here, which is kind of interesting. Let's talk about Dragon Link. Okay, Dragon Link is pretty good with the new release of Wyvern Burster back to 1. It now has the ability to actually play the game, whereas previously it lost some of its best starters. Right, having to lose Collapse Serpent. Well, you don't have to lose Collapse Serpent there, but more specifically, not having as many good light targets in particular really, really did hurt the deck. It also got Druid Storm to 3, but honestly, yeah, Dragon Link's pretty good. I played it today on stream, and I don't have too much faith on it, but I think it was really underrated even with the limitation, or with the banning of Wyvern Burster, but with Wyvern Burster back, I think that it does have the ability to do similar things to what it previously did. And yeah, it's still pretty good. Is it insane? No, but it feels very similar to like Centurion, where it's like, it's a pretty low effort, not low effort, it's a pretty low impact end board that's very difficult to deal with, right? Herald's not real. This, yeah, no, it's not real. Eldritch isn't real. Not real. These aren't real decks. Exorcister exists. You could probably do something with it. Fire King. Yeah, Fire King Snake Eye is the best deck. I don't think I need to explain myself with that one, but Fire King Snake Eye is the best deck. It has so many options available to it. It can do whatever it wants, almost at any time, right? It's very difficult to deal with its end board, mostly due to the fact that, well, not even just its end board, just like its board in general, right? Even if it gets interrupted, it still has the ability to either play through those interruptions pretty effectively, or kind of just end on like a mediocre board that's still pretty strong, just due to the fact that it has so much additional effects that it can do during your turn, if you like interact with it improperly. So there's that. Flunder, I think, is also pretty decent right now, mostly due to the fact that there's a lot of Link decks running around. So there's that. Yeah, it's fairly decent. Not insane, but fairly decent. Frightfur is heavily slept on. It's a good deck. For Hire, Runic Sprite is a deck that technically still does exist, but it's not very good. Galaxy Eyes is honestly not terrible. Gay Guardian's terrible. Gemknight can't do anything. Generator is probably still fairly decent. Ghost Trick is not real. Not a real deck. Punk, aka, well, this is technically Gold Pride, but Punk Gold Pride still technically exists and is playable. Do we have... I'm trying to see if we have, like, Pachycephalo on here that I need to be worried about. Okay, let's talk about Stun. This will be my Stun thing. Stun is honestly not great. A lot of people are playing Stun, but I don't think it's all that great. I think the main reason people are playing it is because they are... No, I have no idea. It's pretty bland. It doesn't really do all that well. Like, it's okay. I think it's mostly just that people are kind of getting free wins with it, where their opponents are like, oh, I can't beat this, when in reality they probably could, right? So there's that. I think it's just people not wanting to play against Stun, so Stun seems to be doing better than it probably actually is. So there you go. Play against Stun. Well, I shouldn't say play against it. I should say, if you play against it, don't just immediately surrender. You're probably going to win that game. Grand Maju's not real. Horus is technically a deck that exists and is fairly decent. The Ice Barrier cards are fine. They're okay. They're not insane. Adagnister is fairly decent. Not insane, but like similar in nature to like Code Talker and the like. Pretty good. Not real. All of these are not real. Kashtira still has the ability to just kind of pop off with a really, really good starting hand and just immediately win the game. It's very difficult to deal with a Kashtira end board. However, it's also extremely easy to deal with a Kashtira end board. Labyrinth got some new toys, and with that, Labyrinth has become, or still remains, one of the best decks in a best-of-one format. Incredibly strong. Blackout Laughs is very nice. You now have the ability to play more, like, discard fodder stuff and what have you. And, yeah, honestly, just, it got better due to Blackout Laughs and, mostly just that one, right? But yeah, all in all, playing a more trap-centric style, I think, is pretty good. There's a lot of decks as well that don't really do well into Labyrinth, right? Things like Ubel, things like Branded, things like Voiceless Voice, right? Some of the other decks like Centurion's not exactly great into, you know, Set 5 Pass. So there's a bunch of decks like that where it's just like, oh, cool, this pretty good matchup, right? There's also a bunch of matchups like Fire King that just is unbelievably bad. Now, with that being said, Labyrinth can still just kind of beat any of those decks due to the fact that it can just draw well, right? And like go first. So there's that. Live Twin, aka Live Twin Sprite, is still a fairly decent deck. Able to put out a fairly competent end board, but not insane. Actually, I'm going to move this into Rogue. I think this variant of Sprite is just bad. Excuse me, sorry. Zombie. It's okay. The thing is, having the Zombie World Floodgate, I don't think matters too much in the current metagame. I guess well, okay, it does do a fair amount into Ubel, but that's kind of it. So, there's that. Luna Light's not real. Lyralisk, Bird Up. Bird Up, I think, is still pretty heavily underrated, but I'll put it in tier 3. I think, yeah, I think Bird Up is still fairly good. Lyralisk, Tri-Brigade, still a fairly competent deck. Insane? No, but pretty good. Magic Spectre got some new support, putting it into Rogue tier from pretty much everything else. Do we have Kieran? I don't remember. Either way, I don't think it does all that much. It's okay. It has some nice interactions. Mana is fine. Mana Dimian's biggest problem is Maxi. It's kind of it. Also, its end boards aren't insane, right? So you're like committing a whole bunch to make this end board that can be broken by a lot of different decks, right? Like Branded doesn't give a crap. Tier doesn't really care. Fire King Snake Eye can either prevent you from playing the game through hand traps, or it could potentially break your board due to how strong the Fire Kings are at breaking boards. So, it's okay. Marincess, I think, is a bit slept on as well. I think Marincess is still pretty strong, just in general. Mathmech's pretty good. I'm going to put this one solidly in tier 2 as well. I think Mathmech's just, in general, strong. Yes, it does lose to Maxi, kind of. The thing is, it plays so many non-engine that you can absolutely just stop Maxi pretty often, right? And then on top of that, Circular is just insane. So, there you go. Not real. Not real. Memento is pretty rogue. Pretty rogue. Makonko's also pretty rogue. And I know what you're saying. Makonko's actually really good in this style of format. It's really not. There's a lot of decks that don't really care. Especially with Yubel running around, which is just better Makonko. I think most decks are prepared for what Makonko is providing, right? So for the most part, I think that it has dropped quite significantly in terms of its presence. Basically it. Naturia is also fairly okay, but with the runic stuff being so heavily limited, I don't think it's all that great. This is just bad stun, by the way. That one is just bad stun. Burn's pretty bad. Orchis, I think Orchis is also pretty heavily slapped on, but even with that being said, I'm not going to put it above Rogue. I think it's mostly a little bit carried by the Horus stuff, but it's still good, right? Paleo's pretty good. Set 5 pass, pretty good. Pretty good in the current metagame. Okay, Pendulum's actually not that terrible. We'll just put, like, Pendulum in tier Rogue. It's not that good. But it's not that bad. We already talked about that one. Plunder's... No, Plunder's pretty bad. I was going to say Plunder's pretty good, but no, it's not. We already talked about Punk. Pearly. Pearly is a tier 1 deck. Pearly's pretty good. Don't know what else to say. Obviously, Pearly is a bit more difficult to play, which I think is where a lot of people struggle to play it, or struggle to choose to play it as well. But yeah, honestly, if you want to play Pearly, it is a good deck. You may not do well at the start, but yeah, you will climb with it. It's a good deck. It has a lot of good matchups, right? It's good into Branded. It's good into, well, honestly, it's not terrible into UL, right? It's good into tier, kind of. It's fairly decent into a bunch of stuff. So there's that. I can't really think as much off the top of my head what, like, its best matchups are. But yeah, there you go. Raid Raptor's okay. Raid Raptor with the new support is now a rogue tier deck, because it kind of relies on its gimmick. Red Eyes is not real. Rescue Ace is still pretty decent. I'm going to put it in tier 2. I think it's fairly good. But hey, if you're going to play Rescue Ace, why not play Labyrinth, right? Or, if you're going to play Rescue Ace, why not play Fire King, right? Like, go one way or the other. I think those are better options. Resonator is not real. We already talked about this deck. Ritual Wilbeast is not real. Runic technically exists. Salamangreats, honestly, still pretty decent, all things considered. I don't think it's insane. I think Code of Soul and stuff like that are a bit gimmicky for the most part. But, like, if you just play, like, a low to the ground, kind of, you know, recycle your resources style of Salamangreat, I think it can do quite well. We already talked about... Well, okay, this is technically a Scareclaw, but Scareclaw is not real. Not a real deck. Sadly. I think Pure Snake Eye is still, like, tier 2. If we're not talking about, like, Fire King Snake Eye, but more so just Pure Snake Eye with, like, maybe, I don't know, Kashtira thrown in there or something along those lines to kind of boost its end board a little bit, it's still pretty decent. It's not insane, but, like, it's pretty good. Speedroid's not real. Sprite! I think almost every Sprite variant is pretty heavily slapped on. Genuinely. More specifically, the Yubel variant, in particular, is pretty strong. Having access to the Yubel cards in particular, which allows you to go into Phantom of Yubel, which is just really strong. And then on top of that, you also have the ability to go into all of your Sprite combo, which I think is pretty strong in the current metagame due to the fact that having multiple, or like having the ability to negate a spell and a monster is pretty powerful. And then on top of that, you can also do like a whole bunch of other things, like go into SP and stuff like that. And it doesn't lose to U-Bell, which is notable, right? U-Bell would have to crash into like 5 different guys, maybe, for you to die. So it's pretty solidly a good matchup, right? Yeah, this is probably me projecting because I love this deck and I'm actually good at it. But honestly, I think it's very heavily underrated. Yes, it kind of doesn't play well into Maxi, but it absolutely can, right? Mostly due to the fact that your cards inherently summon, which means if your opponent is not like paying attention, you could just get like 4 free summons. So that's something. Doesn't always happen, but like it's possible. Also, you can play a whole bunch of hand traps, which is notable. We already talked about you. Well, is this supposed to be Tri-Brigade? No, Tri-Brigade's over there. Spiral's terrible, by the way. I love Spiral, but it's so bad. Sky Striker is heavily overrated. I will always hold by the truth that Sky Striker is overrated. It's still Rogue, but it's overrated. I think Hero is better. Did we talk about Super Heavy Samurai? I think Super Heavy Samurai is a tier 3 deck. I think this one is also pretty underrated. I think a lot of people, when the first ban list came around for Super Heavy Samurai and was like, you know, it kind of nerfed its consistency, people were like, I'm going to drop it. It's no longer the best deck. It's still good. It still does crazy things. You can play a whole bunch of hand traps and then just prevent your opponent from playing the game. Yeah, it's solid. Sword Soul is Rogue. Tragic, I know. Tyr is, again, one of the best decks in the game. Probably, maybe potentially the second best deck. Maybe. Yeah, Tyr's just solid. There's a lot of different ways to build it. There's a lot of different ways to play it, but it honestly still ends on one of the best end boards in the entire game. Like if it goes uninterrupted, basically, and it can play through a whole bunch of boards with basically just engine, which is kind of unique. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's just all gas. Tenues aren't terrible, but we kind of already talked about them with Sword Soul. Weather Painters aren't great. Therions by themselves are really terrible. Honestly, Thunder Dragons aren't terrible due to Colossus being in the game, so there's that. Tunes are really bad. We kind of already talked about you. Honestly, Trap Trick's pretty much Rogue. Having the ability to negate effects in Grave, specifically, is pretty good for Trap Trick, right? And then also being able to, like, floodgate stuff so that it can't be used as link material. Again, pretty decent, but for the most part, not too much is going on there. Tri-Brigade's pretty good, just in general. Similar in nature to, like, Bird Up. It's a solid strat. There's a lot of different builds that you can go for. Tri-Brigade Sprite is probably the best one, but you can also play, like, pure Tri-Brigade if you really wanted to with, like, 1,000,000 hand traps. You could also play Bird Up, etc. So I think Tri-Brigade's pretty good. Not a real deck, not a real deck, not a real deck. Definitely a real deck. Unchained's pretty good as well. Can break boards pretty efficiently. Has the ability to play hand traps or board breakers, etc. Sets up one of the most insane end boards as well. If it does not have to contend with Maxi, which is not all the time, but like if it doesn't have to deal with Maxi resolving, this end board is insane. Plays through hand traps pretty effectively. Ends on one of the most insane end boards, and yeah, just very, very solid. Valmonica's fine. It's okay. We already talked about Zombie. Maker's Soul is, you know what? I'm gonna put it in tier 3. It's fine. Smile. It has some fairly decent matchups, mostly due to the fact that it can, like, dodge targeting effects, which is pretty nice, right? Being able to dodge, like, Imperm and what have you. But yeah, it's not great, but it's pretty good. Voiceless. Voiceless is okay. There we go. Well, there we go. There we go. That's tier 2. I don't know what, like, any of these are. Yeah, these are all terrible. I'm sorry. Yubble! Yubble is actually the second best deck. Smile. I'm not gonna explain that one. Zodiac, slept on. Still pretty bad, but it is slept on. You could play Zodiac. Zodiac's pretty cool. Okay, let's talk about the 3 new decks that came out. Gen X, well, I should say the support for 2 of them, and then Ragnaraka. Lightsworn, Gen X, Ragnaraka. Ragnaraka by itself is kind of mid. It doesn't really do a whole lot. I don't think it's terrible, right? But as far as a new archetype is going, it doesn't really do much, right? Most of the time, you're going to play it in the Plant Link shenanigans, okay? Lightsworn, honestly pretty good, right? Especially when paired with Tier, but just in general, the Lightsworn stuff is actually fairly solid. You have the ability to go for quite a wide variety of different stuff, or you just FTK your opponent. I wish I was kidding, but yeah, you can just straight up FTK your opponent. It's hilarious. Gen X is bad. Gen X is so bad. Even with the new monster, right? In theory, you could go like link 1 into a whole bunch of different stuff. In practice, it's kind of bad. It dies to a singular interaction, and its end board is okay. It's not anything to write home about, right? It's just like a worse math mech end board, right? Or what have you. So it's okay. It's not great. But overall, there's my list, right? Let me know if you guys agree or disagree with this list in particular. And yeah, that's basically it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys did indeed enjoy. If you did, I like us very much. I appreciate it. And if you want to check out more content like this, as well as more Yu-Gi-Oh!, then just be sure to subscribe. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. And remember to always stay frosty. Bye-bye. Shout out to the Frost Guard, my members. Thank you guys so much for the support, and I hope you enjoy the content.